Welcome to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Capital Fund Green Physical Needs Assessment. My name is Bill Thorson, and I will be your host today. With me to my right is Bruce Ryder from HUD's Office of Capital Improvements. Bruce, would you like to provide some opening remarks?
Yes, good afternoon and good morning to those in the West. On behalf of Jeff Riddell and the Capital Fund team, I'd like to welcome you to this first in a series of trainings on the new P&A process and the GP&A tool. We look forward to working with you as we take this next step at improving the way HUD and our housing authorities do business to fulfill our mission of maintaining decent housing for those most in need. I've had the pleasure of meeting many of you as I've traveled around the country over the last several months. And for those of you who I haven't yet met, I wanted to let you know that I continue to be working on this initiative from headquarters to provide continuity as Econometrica and the field offices take on the day-to-day management of the P&A implementation. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the many housing authorities who have already engaged in this process and are well along in completing P&As. Your comments and inputs have been very valuable to us as we've developed the tool and the procedures to put it into place. And indeed, a number of housing authorities have already submitted a final GP&A, made a final GP&A submittal. And I'd like to thank those that have already done that. So that's all by way of saying it's not too late to begin thinking about this process, engaged in this process. It is time. And with that, Bill will take you through the current status of the GP&A initiative. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. That's not going to be the last time you hear somebody say it's not too late to get started. It's very important. In terms of our session today, our agenda is going to be something along the lines of we're going to start off with an overview, give you a general sense in terms of what the program's about, particularly the public housing program and the capital, and how we got to where we are, and then we'll talk about the notion of strategic planning, which as we get further and further into the history of the public housing program, the current history, it becomes more and more important. Once we talk about strategic planning a little bit, then we'll talk about the green physical needs assessment that's coming down the pike, the energy audit, and then the discussion will go over to the whole notion of rolling out this whole new green physical needs assessment. At that point, you should be tired, and we will take a break. From there, we will have a question and answer session. And we have an email address to which you can send your questions to. So get your pencils and paper out and write this down. phapna@hud.gov. Let me repeat it. phapna@hud.gov. So as we go through the course of the next 2 to 3 hours, as you begin to get think about questions that you have about the whole process, send those in. We have a computer here. We can read those questions, and then we'll try and answer those for you. Once we have our question and answer session, we'll take a break. At that point in time, we want to give you a sense of what this whole new GP&A software is all about. And so we will have one of our contractors come in and do a demonstration on the screen so you can see where it is on the website and all of the information relating to that, show you how to download it, and then the architecture of the software so you can see exactly what you're going to get once you begin doing your green physical needs assessment. We'll give you another break at that juncture, and then we'll leave some more time for questions and answers. So that's going to be our agenda for today. This is intended to be like a GP&A 101 course to give you a good basic understanding of the whole process and bring you up to speed so that you'll be ready to do this. I need to tell you that this GP&A requirement that's coming down the pike is a very, very important activity in terms of the future of your housing authorities. It's going to give you data in which to make key strategic decisions about your portfolio and your operations. And you really can't separate your operations from your portfolio, because the physical condition of your property affects your bottom line. With asset-based management, we want to make sure that our expenses are within the income that we derive from those individual projects, and the physical features of your public housing portfolio can help you do that. The simple example would be your heating, ventilation, and cooling system. If you got an old system, it's going to cost you a lot in utilities. Utilities is a big chunk of your operating costs. So it's very important to make sure that you're looking at both the physical condition of your properties as well as the operating costs of your property. The other thing I need to point out is that this is not a race. It's a marathon. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to invest a lot of time in implementing, particularly the first year, implementing the Green Physical Needs Assessment. So you need to think about that up front, and you need to plan accordingly. This is not one of those cases where it's a form that we just fill out today and send in to HUD and then we're done. So keep that in mind. The other thing I can't emphasize too much is that our field offices around the country will be your first line of assistance in implementing the physical needs assessment. So as you begin to have questions, you're not sure about things in terms of what to do, contact your local field offices so you can get guidance from them. We will be working with local field offices to make sure that they're fully trained, they have the information, will be available to back them up to provide information. So you need to make sure that you have a good working relationship with your local field office so we can make sure that this rolls out as smoothly as we can possibly get it. So, having said that, let's talk about the public housing program, how we started, where we got to where we are, because it all affects our decisions that we're making today in our public housing, because this is not your mother's and father's public housing program. This is a completely different animal. So having said that, I think the first thing we would want to talk about is, where did public housing start? It started in 1937. What did we have in 1937? We had a depression. With a depression like that, what do we need? We need jobs. Have we heard that before? Yes, we have. Isn't that right, Bruce?
Yes, we have.
That's right. So when we have a depression and we need jobs, what do we have? We have a stimulus package. Heard that one before, Bruce?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. And so what happened was, in 1937, Congress passed the U.S. Housing Act of 1937. Basically, what the 37 Act was intended to do was to create jobs through the construction of housing for low-income families. And so we started back in 1937, and we had a lot of heavy production between 1940 and 1975-ish, to the point where at this juncture we have approximately 1.1 million units of public housing around the country. And that's not chump change. It's a lot of properties around the country. From there, I think it's important to note that in the early days, housing authorities were allowed to charge low rents for their public housing properties. There were no federal subsidies. There was no capital fund. There was no operating fund. There was none of that stuff. So we basically charged low rents. Well, if you're a property manager on the private side, charging low rents is problematic from a facilities management perspective, from being able to maintain properties, being able to upgrade them over time as parts of your facility begin to wear out. And so that's how it started. We were charging low rents. And some of you, I think the accountants are very frequently calling it the low rent public housing. And so that's where that came from. So having said that, housing authorities were charging low rents for the first 30 years until 1968, when Congress passed an amendment introduced by Senator Brooke from Massachusetts. And that amendment to the U.S. Housing Act of 1937 said basically that housing authorities could not collect any more than, initially it was 25% and later it was 30% of low-income families' income and rent. So think about this from a property management perspective and a property maintenance perspective. We were charging low rents, now we're charging 30% of a low-income family's income and rent. If you're a property manager trying to make ends meet, that's a problem, isn't it? So effectively, housing authorities had problems in terms of maintaining their inventory over time. So Congress decided around the 1968 timeframe to provide operating subsidies and modernization funding for housing authorities. At that juncture, we started to develop the Comprehensive Improvement Assistance Program. It's called CAP. That was an application-based program for all housing authorities. Later, as time went on, not all housing authorities got funded, nor were they necessarily funded for all of their needs. As you get into the 1990 timeframe, Congress decided to create the Comprehensive Grant Program. And that was a grant program for housing authorities initially of 500 and later of 250 units or more. Part of the issue at that juncture was that housing authorities felt that they needed a predictable stream of funding to be able to maintain their inventory over time. Even though the amount of the funding stream wasn't necessarily what we were looking for, it was still at least predictable. At the same time as the Comp Grant Program rolled in, the housing authorities with fewer than 250 units still had to apply and be selected for the CAP program. Again, that was an application-based program, and so we were running two programs simultaneously. Again, not all the funding that we needed to maintain our inventory. Then as you get into the 1998 timeframe, Congress passed the Quality Housing Work Responsibility Act, QARA, for those of you who go back that far. Of course, I don't. And that established what we now know today as the Capital Fund and the Operating Fund. With the Capital Fund including development used to be separate back in the olden days in your mother's and father's public housing program. And so now development is part of the Capital Fund, and the Capital Fund is for all housing authorities. So we get rid of this whole notion of the segregation between the small and the large housing authorities. So I've talked about the fact that we initially started out with low rents, and then we went to the Brooke Amendment where we're collecting no more than 30% of low-income families' income and rent. And that is a problem from a facilities management perspective. So around 1998, HUD decided that it needed to assess what the physical condition of the overall properties are. What is our backlog for the public housing industry? And what is our annual accrual? Backlog being those things that we need to fix now, and annual accrual being those things that, all things being equal, we'll need to do each year as we go down through history. So in 1998, the firm that HUD hired, Apt Associates, determined that the backlog of unmet modernization needs at that juncture was $20 billion. And that on an annual basis, you accrued an additional $2 billion. So now we know that we've got this significant backlog that's accrued over the 50 or so years of the program. In 2010, we did a second study, also done by Apt Associates, and that came up with a figure of $26 billion of backlog and an accrual now of $3 billion. So that sort of gives you a sense in terms of the backlogs growing, accruals growing, our properties are getting older, and so it's very important to begin thinking about your physical inventory and what it costs to fix it up and where to go from here. So as a result of that, you get your capital needs study, And it tells you that you need to do a lot of thinking about your portfolio. You need to think about long-term planning. If you're going to stay in business, if you're going to keep these public housing properties in business, you've got to do long-term strategic planning. In addition, you need to think about what are the sources of funding. In your Mothers and Fathers public housing program, we had our operating subsidies and we had our modernization funding, and we didn't worry about anything else. We just saw the history, the backlog, the studies of the capital needs. The money is just not there to maintain those inventories. And so the survival requirement here is you got to start looking for other sources of funding. So you have to ask yourself, what is my backlog? What are the total costs now and in the future? And what do I want to do with those? And you can only do that through successful strategic planning. Now, long-term, short-term, and intermediate-term planning is necessary in order to be able to move forward with whatever you decide to do. And I got news for you. Housing authorities need to start now. The bulk of our inventory is old. I was at a housing authority up in the Northeast not that long ago, and I talked to the executive director, and she said her properties were in pretty good shape. Well, I said, your properties were also built in the 1970s. As opposed to the 1940s. So you're going to be in the same shape that our other colleagues are in that have the older inventories as we get 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the pike. And with appropriations being what they are, without being judgmental, they are what they are. And so you need to think about, what am I going to do with my inventory? What are my costs? And where can I get money to do what I want to do? And so that's why it's important for you to start strategic planning now, more so than you have been in the past. So let's talk a little bit about this whole notion of strategic planning. As I mentioned before, you need to be doing both long-term, intermediate, and short-term strategic planning. And part of the question that a lot of housing authorities will ask us is, when you talk about long-term strategic planning, what are you talking about? And typically, the benchmark that I use is that when you get your capital fund ACC, what's the ACC term? It's 20 years for your capital fund, right? You're extending your existing ACC an additional 20 years every time you sign that 2012, 2013, each year it gets extended for another 20 years. So you need to be looking at your inventory and what your costs are each year for the next 20 years, so you can begin thinking about what you need to do. Because if you're not paying attention, 5 years from now, you could have a very large expense that you don't have the money to be able to pay for. So you got to think about it in advance. That's why the strategic planning becomes so important. Now, we already have the infrastructure through the PHA plan process that was created by QARA, and we have a set of regulations at 903 for that. And that has a time frame of 5 years. So that's our short-term strategic planning. With the use of a physical needs assessment that goes out for a period of 20 years, that's going to give you the data to begin being able to make decisions with regard to that inventory, because you have the data. As you begin to collect the data, you need to start asking yourself a number of questions. And I sort of alluded to it a couple of minutes ago, which is, what are we really going to do with our inventory? Are we going to repair it? We're going to modernize it? We're going to blow it up? Are we going to replace it? We're going to turn it into home ownership? Could be one or a combination of those. You can't make those decisions unless you have the data. The second part of the equation, data being one, item two is the money. I just mentioned that a couple of minutes ago. Can't emphasize that too much. You need to look for money. You can't necessarily rely just on the capital fund and the operating fund. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's the way life is these days. You need to be looking for other sources of money. And so that has to play into your strategic planning process. Now, in order to develop a strategic planning process, you have to have data. What's the starting point for having data with strategic planning? It's a physical needs assessment. We've talked about that a couple of times, and we're going to talk about it a couple of times more as we go through the next 2 hours. So you need to have a physical needs assessment in order to make these decisions. And of course, we all know that when you guys accepted the ARRA funding, the Capital Fund ARRA-ACC required you to do a physical needs assessment. So we've already got that infrastructure built in there. So that sort of gives you a general overview in terms of why this whole issue is very important. It's important for our survival as an industry. The good news is that the decision-making process is in your hands. You need to collect the data, you need to do the analysis, and you need to make the decisions locally. HUD is going to provide you with the infrastructure to be able to help you to do that, and that's what this whole process is about. So let's move forward. Let's talk a little bit about regulations, one of my favorite subjects, as you probably all know, right, Bruce?
That's correct.
Absolutely. I love those regs.
Love them.
So from an infrastructure perspective, the capital fund rule is a 24 CFR 905. We still have the development regs that'll be merged into 905. Eventually, we still have some of the pieces of the CAP and Comp Grant regulations that need to be merged into 905. And HUD published in 2010 a proposed rule to globally pull all that stuff together. That's the first thing. The second thing they did was to publish a second proposed rule that specifically talked to the requirement to do a physical needs assessment. And while I think the global proposed rule mentioned it, the second proposed rule that I'm talking about now gave you further information in terms of where HUD was going with the physical needs assessment requirements. And so from here on out, this whole notion of a P&A for the purposes of the capital fund is going to be called the Green Physical Needs Assessment, GP&A. So if you hear the term GP&A, that's for our favorite capital fund. Now, the next regulation that plays into this equation is one at 24 CFR 965. That's sort of a general rule that has a bunch of things in it. One of which is utilities, utility allowances, but it also has in it a requirement for housing authorities to do an energy audit once every 5 years and incorporate cost-effective energy conservation measures as a function of your capital modernization program. What HUD is proposing to do is to move the energy audit requirement from 965 over to the capital fund in 905. And so now we have it all together in one rule. You won't have to go to, 4 or 5 different locations in terms of trying to understand this creature called the capital fund. So it'll all be consolidated into a single rule. So that sort of sets the infrastructure in terms of where the rule changes are. So we have a proposed rule out there that will implement the new physical needs requirement and specifically the green physical needs assessment, the green GP&A. So let's spend a couple of moments talking about the types of things that are in this proposed rule that I just described to you. Item number 1 is that all housing authorities, regardless of size, must prepare and submit to HUD a physical needs assessment. There's no exemption for small housing authorities, so everybody's got to do it, just like your PHA plan. The Green Physical Needs Assessment will be on a property level, project or AMP level, and you will also have a summary level information. So each property, consistent with our principles of asset-based management, because we want to think of these projects individually and what does it cost to operate and what does it cost to maintain over time. This is an important concept in terms of moving forward from your mothers and fathers public housing program to what we now have today and what's available to us relative to funding and the rest of the private market. So we're going to have project-based physical needs assessment. We'll have summary information. I mentioned the term of the Capital Fund ACC is 20 years, so we decided to make the Green Physical Needs Assessment to cover a 20-year period. So it's going to take into consideration life cycle issues. So you're going to go in, you're going to take a look at what do I need to fix right now, and that's going to be our backlog that I talked about in a couple of minutes. It's also going to look at life cycles, so that, for example, I talked about the heating, ventilation, and cooling systems, right? Heating system is normally 20, 25 years in terms of a life cycle. Your heating system may have been put in 10 years ago. So if it had a 20-year life cycle, 10 years from now, you're going to need to think about replacing that heating system because the life cycle is going to run out. You need to know that the life cycle on that particular heating system is going to run out so you can plan to be able to fund it when the need arises. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because you can make some adjustments as you go along. But that's the whole notion here, is that we want this physical needs assessment. We want to look at what our current needs are to fix up the public housing project, and we want to look at the life cycle needs over a 20-year period. The next thing we want to talk about is the fact that housing authorities are going to have to conduct the physical needs assessment regardless of what the P&A shows their backlog. In other words, if your backlog shows that you've got $10 million worth of needs and you only get $100,000, you still have to do a physical needs assessment because you need to know what that backlog is so you can make strategic decisions in terms of what are you going to do with the property long term. So you need to have that information. So regardless of how big your backlog is, all housing authorities are going to need to conduct it. The GP&A, the P&A is going to be an eligible expense under the Capital Fund, as it has been in the past under the Comprehensive Grant Program, and when we also talked about the physical needs assessment in the Modernization Standards Handbook as well. So nothing particularly new. This is one of my favorite phrases in the regs. Housing authorities will complete the physical needs assessment in the form and manner prescribed by HUD. And I'll get to that in a second. So remember, in the form and manner prescribed by HUD. The Green Physical Needs Assessment is going to account for costs associated with Section 504 of the Rehab Act. That requires housing authorities to make their units accessible to persons with disabilities. The P&A is not going to be a compliance tool. What it's going to reflect is if you as the housing authority decide that you need to provide accessible units and you come up with costs for providing those accessible units, you just reflect those costs in the GP&A. That's all it is. It's not a compliance tool. Next item, the GP&A will think about the issue of planned demolition. So that if you are going to blow up Bill Thorson Homes and you've got an approval from the SAC, obviously you won't need to spend time doing a physical needs assessment on a property that you've got approved for demolition. We also, as a function of the GP&A, we also want to think about things like healthy home issues, like air quality, pest control management. There are physical things that can enhance the quality of life for the residents. So you need to think about those. As you go through the P&A, and we're going to talk about that in more detail later, but as you go through the P&A, you complete the P&A, one of the requirements of the reg is that you submit the P&A to HUD, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, part of the question, and this is going to be a little complicated here, but part of the question is, when am I going to be required to submit a GP&A to HUD? First issue on that has to do with the effective date of the final rule. The first P&As will be due to come in to HUD 120 days after the effective date of the final rule. So the final rule is not out as of today, so there is no starting trigger yet. Once you get a final rule, then we'll have an effective date, then GP&As will start to have to come in 120 days from that date. That's part one. Part two is, once that kicks in, your GP&A is due to HUD 120 days prior to the end of your fiscal year. Now think about that. You've got a PHA plan that's normally due 75 days before the end of your fiscal year. So the HUD requirement is that you're going to do your GP&A 120 days prior to the end of your fiscal year. So I'm going to tell you right now, you need to be using that GP&A in order to prepare your your PHA plan. That's an important point in here. This is not just an exercise that you fill it out and you put it in the file, or just you send it to HUD and forget about it. You need to be using these GP&As to help you decide what you need to do relative to your portfolio and include those decisions in your PHA plan. You will be able to use P&A data, if you've already done a P&A, up to 2 years prior to the effective date of the GP&A, as long as it meets our HUD's requirements, which is that it's got to have a 20-year life cycle to it. It's got to integrate the energy audit, which I'll talk about a little bit more. There's a discussion in PIH Notice 2010-46. Now, let me give you an example of what I just described to you. Understanding that this is fictitious, the final rule hasn't been published yet, but let's assume for the sake of argument that the final rule is going to be published on March 2nd, 2013. Again, that's a fictitious date, but I'm going to use it as an example. Normally, when we publish regulations as a final rule, we make them effective 30 days later. So in this particular example, if we published on March 2nd, the rule would be effective April 1st, 2001. So the first P&As are due on July 30th, 2013, which is 120 days after April 1st. And so the question, excuse me, the question then is, which PHAs are due to have P&As done 120 days before their fiscal year begins after July 30th, 2013? And the answer to that is the December 31st PHAs, because 120 days prior to December 31st is September 1st. And September 1st, 2013 is after July 30th. Piece of cake, right?
Can I interject?
Please, do.
Okay. There are 4 due dates. There are only 4 due dates. September 1st, December 1st, essentially, March, and whatever the next one, June.
Right.
There are 4 due dates. So you just back up from your own fiscal year end, decide which of those 4 due dates is your due date, but that first due date would not be triggered at a minimum 120 days after the final rule. That's to give everyone time to start. So there's a minimum for the first people, the minimum amount of time of notice, if you will, official notice from a published notice would be 5 months.
Right.
But here we are talking several months before it's going to be published. There are certainly lots of things that you can be doing to get ready for that. If your fiscal year end is later, obviously your due date would be later.
And I want to emphasize on a point you picked up on,
right,
which is Don't wait until the final rule is published to get started on this stuff, to start thinking about this stuff. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. We're going to beat it into your heads as we get further down there. You can't wait until this stuff comes out. You need to start your prep now in order to be able to get ready. You need to start your education process. The other thing, I think we will probably put those 4 dates that you just described on the HUD Capital Fund P&A website.
Right.
So it'll be fairly easy for everybody to understand. It's a little bit complicated because of this 120 days after the publication of the final rule, and then 120 days before. It just was coincidental that it was 120 days, but we're going to publish those dates on the website. I can probably bet dimes to donuts that the field offices will probably be reminding you of those dates as this stuff kicks in. One of the things I didn't mention, but it may be apparent from the discussion, is that these are going to kick in based on your fiscal year end. And so everybody's not going to be due all at once. So all 3,100 and however many 67 housing authorities that get capital funds aren't going to be making submissions all at once. There's a relatively even distribution of 600 to 800 housing authorities every quarter. And so we'll be cycling in each quarter as your fiscal year end kicks in. So we'll have that on the web. You'll get plenty of notice on this, and so it shouldn't be a problem. But the takeaway here, aside from explaining what the effective date is or when that might be, is that you need to get started now.
Would be good practice to get started now.
Strongly advise. Strongly advise.
And just more emphasis, at this point in time, it's not possible that anyone would be due before September 1st. Just
because of the mechanics.
Just because of the mechanics of days at this point. So that's the very earliest, even not knowing when the final publication date of the rule will be.
Good. Having said that, I can imagine that you're going to ask, who can do my physical needs assessment? Can my maintenance guy do it? Do I have to contract it out? And the answer is, our main concern is that whoever does the the P&A, is qualified to do it. So what do we consider qualified? We need somebody who is experienced in performing residential assessments, having knowledge of building systems, health and safety issues, structural issues, energy efficiency, green construction, and cost estimating. They need to have at least 5 years of experience in facility inspection and in assessment, 5 years of experience in cost estimating, because remember, we're estimating what your current costs are, and I have more to say on that in a little bit. And so that aspect of it becomes very important. They have to have knowledge of the applicable building codes, because as you make modernization improvements, you got to know what the local code is relative to making improvements to existing structures. You have to have knowledge of energy efficiency. Because as we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, you're also going to have an energy audit that is going to be incorporated into your GP&A. You need to have a working knowledge of computers, which at this juncture, most people that I've seen in the industry, they've all, at least at this juncture, got a working knowledge of computers. I even have an iPhone myself. And yes, I'm very progressive, and I actually rented or leased a new car, and it sucks my playlist into the car itself, so I can listen while I'm on the road. But having said that, so the key here is whoever does the P&A needs to have experience in using computer systems, in building systems, in assessment systems, looking at residential properties as we have on our PowerPoint slide. If you want to do it yourself, your maintenance staff or whoever at your housing authority, your architect, you can have whoever you want do it. as long as they have these qualifications. We have built in a set of software all of the requirements for the GP&A, and that's what we call it. We call it the GP&A, Green Physical Needs Assessment. Housing authorities are required to use the Green Physical Needs Assessment software provided by HUD. It's on our HUD website. We'll show you that in a little bit later, where to download it. It's easily downloadable. I was able to do it myself, so it's not all that difficult. The GP&A needs to be performed in conjunction with your energy audits, and it needs to be integrated into your GP&A, because it's important to be thinking, as I mentioned before, about physical improvements in energy all at the same time. My example is toilets, right? Back in the olden days, in your mother's and father's public housing program, toilets used what, 6 gallons of water?
Was it that much?
Yeah, somewhere.
I'm young.
Yeah, right.
3 gallons
somewhere in that vicinity, 3 to 6 gallons. The toilets today now,
1.6?
1.6, 1.2 gallons.
Or 1.
Right. So from a facilities management perspective, so long as the toilet works, that's all I'm, as a facilities management guy is concerned with. But we also need to be thinking about operations. We also need to be thinking about asset-based management. Asset-based management, what are we concerned about? We're concerned about our expenses being less than our income. And what's a big chunk of your expenses? Utility costs, which includes water. And so that's why it's important that you look at energy conservation measures as you're walking through this whole process. And we've designed the software, and we'll show this to you a little bit later, to be able to integrate the results of your energy audit inside the GP&A software. So that as you begin to identify issues, like in my example, the toilet, you're going to see that you have an energy conservation measure that's a potential when you need to replace the toilet in this particular example. So that's very important. Energy audits will have to be done within 3 years of the due date of the GP&A. And if they've been done within that 3 years, they won't have to be redone, as long as they're done to the current energy standards that are in the rule that I talked about an hour or so ago, or at least it seems like that, right? Another issue about the P&A rule is that when you submit your P&A to HUD, as I mentioned that before, it's not going to be the entire P&A, all of those data fields. We've set up the software such that it will take selected data, a data extract, and that will then be emailed into HUD. So it's not going to be the whole thing, it's just going to be an extract. So now you've gotten to the point where you're familiar with the GP&A, you know what the requirements are, you've gone out, you've done it, you submitted it to HUD, you're done, right? Not completely. What HUD is looking for is an annual update. The update does not mean you have to redo the P&A. All they're looking for in the update is if you, for example, replace the toilets this year with your capital fund, you report that in your GP&A on the annual update in terms of replacing toilets. It was $10,000 and we paid for it out of the capital fund. That's all we need to do. And that gets uploaded to HUD once a year. And so that should be relatively simple. The GP&A is not a commitment document. It's not anything based on financial, that your financials are going to be based on. It's a data source to be able to assist you in doing your strategic planning. And again, I can't overemphasize that we have this tool that is going to be a great assistance to be able to figure out where you need to go in the next 5, 10, 15 years. The GP&A, as I suggested before, will be used to prepare your PHA plan, your 5-year and the annual plan, and including your capital fund portions of your 5-year and the annual plan. And so I mentioned that before in terms of sequencing. Remember, we do the GP&A 120 days ahead of time. We collect the data, it's done. So when we begin to think about our mission, our goals, and the things that we want to spend our capital fund on, we have data there in order to be able to make those decisions. So you're going to use your GP&A as a function of your 5-year and annual plans. Pay attention. This is very, very, very important at this juncture. I cannot overemphasize. The GP&A software that HUD provides you, and it's available on the web, is going to rely on a download provided by HUD of PIC building and unit data characteristics. The PIC building and unit data characteristics are going to be downloaded into the GP&A before you start your physical needs assessment. HUD is going to make those available, and it's going to get refreshed every 2 to 3 weeks or so. It is incredibly important that your PIC building and unit data characteristics be correct, because if the GP&A that's uploaded to HUD doesn't match exactly, it's going to be rejected. You're going to be notified, and you're going to have to be working with the field office to fix whatever data elements don't match in PIC. And so this is a big ticket item. This can delay the GP&A for quite some time. So it's important that you get in. We've already got the requirement on the capital fund to validate your PIC building and unit data characteristics before HUD runs the formula for your capital fund. You got to make sure that this data is correct. Otherwise, it's going to slow down this process. You're going to be burning up time. The field offices are going to be burning up time. So one of the first things you need to do in this whole process before you do your download is make sure that there's a synchronization between what your inventory is and what's in PIC. It's very important that that be done. And I'm going to re-emphasize that probably 3 or 4 times throughout the next 4 or 5 hours that we're here. That's a joke.
Interjection again.
Please.
One of the first things that we recommend that housing authorities do is get a set of their PIC data file, which has actually been emailed to all housing authorities and can be emailed on request, load it into a tool and check it and see if it matches what your records show as being your PIC inventory. That's just a good first step, just to make sure you're starting off on the right foot.
And if they haven't gotten the PIC building and unit data characteristics, they can go to the email address that I gave them earlier today.
phapna@hud.gov.
phapna@hud.gov, and request the PIC building and unit data characteristics. So you can begin looking at that right now to make sure that everything is going to sync, so that it gets into HUD, and HUD's going to be able to move your P&A through the process, and you won't have the field office saying, you know, let's get this fixed. So, PIC building and unit data characteristics. Make sure it's accurate. Next issue on the GP&A that you need to know. Remember, we're doing a physical needs assessment. We're not just collecting data on the physical condition of the public housing portfolio. The GP&A has to calculate what your costs are, your costs for the work that needs to be done relative to your backlog, and the cost of the work that's going to be needing to be done based on your 20-year life cycle. You have to go out. You have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is you go out and purchase commercial cost indices off of the private market. at your choosing, using obviously your procurement regulations, but you purchase commercial cost indices, and there's 3 or 4 of them out there that are typically used. You talk to your architect, you talk to your engineer, they will, you know, if they don't already have it, they can give you a line on that. So option number 1 is you purchase commercial cost indices. I know some housing authorities that are very good about tracking costs in their geographic area and maintain cost databases. If you have a cost database of accurate and reliable costs for cost in your area, you can use that as well. The takeaway here is you use either commercial cost indices or you use your own cost data that you have to put into the GP&A software. And there's a section of the GP&A software that we'll show you a little bit later entitled the cost library. And that's where you're going to go put this stuff in. Remember I mentioned earlier in the conversation that this is a very staff-intensive exercise. So that aside from learning the whole process that we're talking about today, pulling down the software, learning the software, you need to be going in and putting in cost information. So this is a very staff-intensive, particularly the first year, in terms of loading this information in. So it's very important that you make sure that you're picking up on the cost data element and making decisions in terms of which commercial cost indices you're going to do. As you get into subsequent years, all of the data is probably going to be there. All you need to do is update it as appropriate. Update your PIC data, update your cost data, that sort of thing. So once you get through the first year, it'll be much easier the second year as we move forward with well, not the second year. P&As are required every 5 years.
The next performance.
And so when you do your next GP&A. The cost library, in addition to being collecting cost data, is going to require a couple of other items. The first item that it's going to require is what we describe as architectural takeoffs. In other words, how many square feet of roofing do you have? How many square feet of site area do you have? How many square feet of floor tile do you have? There's a lot of this. How many windows do you have? How many linear feet? There's a lot of architectural takeoffs that need to be determined and put into the software in order to be able to make these cost determinations in terms of what is your current cost and what are your long-term life cycle costs as you go to replace, for example, your roof. You need to know how big your roof is in order to be able to cost out roofing shingles. And so that's why it's important to know all of the architectural takeoffs and incorporate those into the cost library of the GP&A software. Another thing that you're going to need to know, and this is, all of these items are relative to each individual AMP, each individual project. The second item is the effective useful life of the building component. For example, your heating systems. Heating systems normally 25 years in terms of a life cycle. You need to know what that is so that you can put it in the system so that the system can tell you, based on when it was installed, when it needs to be replaced. So we need to know that whole issue of the effective useful life of each of the building components for the entire building. We also need to know what the remaining useful life of those components are for a couple of reasons. One, you may not know when it was originally installed. Number two, not all building components wear at the same rate. Some building components, like other things in life, cars and things like that, last longer than their real their effective useful life. And so that if you, for example, have a roof and it's scheduled to end its useful life in 2015, when you go to take a look at it as a function of your GP&A, and it's still in good shape, you can enter a remaining useful life of whatever you determine that to be. So that if in year 2015 it's scheduled to be replaced, but it can really last another 5 years, you can adjust the GP&A to reflect the actual condition of your property. And so the GP&A has been designed to provide a lot of flexibility for the housing authority to reflect your actual conditions there. As I was saying, you can either use your cost data or the commercial cost indices. We're going to use the effective useful life or the remaining useful life, whichever seems appropriate. Because part of the issue here is we want to get accurate and reliable data relative to the condition of your portfolio. Because without accurate and reliable data, it's not going to, the GP&A isn't going to do you any good. So having said that, I mentioned earlier that the GP&A can be done by either your staff or contractors at your discretion, as long as the people that are doing the GP&A meet the qualifications that I showed you a couple slides back. Next question deals with residents. Are you required to notify the residents? Well, the rule states that the housing authority will make the results of the GP&A available to the residents and the resident advisory board at the time you submit it to HUD. So when you make your data extract up to HUD, you have to make this information available to the residents. Now, I'll tell you before we get to the demonstration that there's a report section in the GP&A software. And when you pull up these reports, whether it's an AMP-based report or a summary report, it looks like a standard HUD form. When it gets printed out, it looks like a standard HUD form. And so it's easy to read, easy to identify, not long on narrative, it's more data related. Yes. And so it makes it easier for you to be able to provide this information that the rule requires to both your residents and the resident advisory board. Not that anybody here on this broadcast would ever, not do what HUD says, but we're sort of obligated to tell you that, number one, you're required to do this. It's going to be included in the rule. And if you don't do it, we have the same sanctions available to us that you would for any other non-compliance with HUD regulation. That includes debarment, suspension. We can issue a corrective action order. All of those things that we would typically do, which we don't very frequently do, because most housing authorities comply with all of HUD's requirements. We just have to say that to make sure you understand that this is a serious thing, and we need to make sure we get it done. So that, in a nutshell, is the GP&A requirement. The next thing, for the next couple minutes, I want to talk about, remember I mentioned we have this energy audit rule. We're moving the energy audit rule from 965 over to 905, which is the capital fund rule. We're making some changes to the energy audit rule. It's just not a word-for-word crossover. We're enhancing it. We're providing more of a description in terms of what HUD is looking for in your energy audits. If you read the old one, it just says do an audit. It doesn't necessarily tell you how. I think we have a guidebook that goes back to, I issued the guidebook in 1993. Okay. And that was based on a PD&R guidebook that was done in either the 70s or the 80s in terms of how to do a simple energy audit. But that's all we said. And as a matter of fact, the language in the reg now doesn't even reference it. The new energy audit requirements in 905 are going to be more descriptive for you. It's going to provide a more standardized process in terms of what HUD is looking for, what you need to provide as a function of this energy audit.
Can I interject there?
Please.
Many people ask this as well, what level of audit is. Many people are familiar with the ASHRAE levels of audits. For those that are familiar with those standards, it's closest to a level 2 ASHRAE energy audit. And the reason we just didn't say ASHRAE level 2 is because you have to be a member of ASHRAE to really get the full specs for it. And we felt that it was better to be descriptive in the rule as to kind of what the energy audit should include rather than force everyone to become members of ASHRAE by the standard. If you're using an architect or an energy auditor, probably an energy auditor to do this, many of them already have that standard, and if that question comes up, it's very close to that level.
Right. So the other issue here is because we're requiring the energy audit to be incorporated into the GP&A, it helps the process flow work a little bit better if we have a certain degree of consistency, so everybody's doing the same thing. And so this is going to help in identifying energy conservation measures, which I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. And what I've already talked about is reducing your capital and your operating costs over time. That's an important function of asset-based management that we want to keep in the back of our mind as we go through this process. So the old audit, aside from just telling you had to do one, said that each project had to have an energy audit, and you had to incorporate cost-effective energy conservation measures into your capital fund plan and incorporate them if you have money to do so, and that you had to do that energy audit once every 5 years. That part of it is going to be the same. Here's where we begin to provide more depth in terms of what's in the energy audit. What the rule says is that the energy audit will look at projected cost, savings, payback periods related to a variety of energy conservation measures. And so you're going to hear us use the term ECMs. That's an energy conservation measure. What is an energy conservation measure? That's something that reduces energy consumption. So that in our example, Bruce's example of his toilet, he had a 6-gallon toilet. He's now a 1.6 gallon.
Or a 1.
Or 1.
1.1.
Do they make 1.1?
1.1.
He's reduced water consumption, so that toilet is an energy installing that toilet becomes an energy conservation measure. So that's as deep as it really has to go. The energy audit may include green measures, and green measures are those things that don't necessarily save energy, but are good for the environment and may provide for health and safety issues like air quality. One of the things I'd point out is that housing authorities are not required to implement specific energy conservation measures unless they're required by statute. So that the energy audit, like the GP&A, is a data source for you. You make the decisions. You do your energy audit, you do your GP&A, you get ready to do your PHA plan so that you're thinking about your mission, you're thinking about your goals, you're thinking about what you want to do with your portfolio based on this data that you have. So that's the whole concept behind this, the process of the energy audit and the process that we're describing to you today. And that's why the rule talks about the fact that you have to integrate utility management into your capital planning process. And so we've made that easy for you by incorporating the energy audit into the GP&A. We actually have a section that will demonstrate to you where you're able to put in energy conservation measures into the software. The energy audit is not, a new one is not going to be required if your current energy audit is less than 3 years old and meets the standards of this new rule that I've just described to you. In addition, we're not going to require an energy audit on those amps or projects that have been approved by HUD, by our Special Application Center, for demolition or disposition. And the timing of the implementation of the energy audit will sequence with the timing of the GP&A rule, final rule, which hasn't come out yet. So we're still waiting for that to be published. So that's some general stuff. Let's get a little bit deeper into the provisions itself. And the energy audit rule talks about two things. It talks about core energy conservation measures, ECMs, and they talk about advanced energy conservation measures. Core energy conservation measures are those ECMs that have a proven track record of reducing energy consumption.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects, like those things related to the building envelope. For example, installation, energy efficient windows, heating and cooling systems. Most of us have had to replace our heating and cooling system lately, and so we know about SEER and Energy Star ratings. I mentioned, Bruce and I mentioned, the issue of water and reducing water through toilets, low flow shower heads, things like that. Those are all energy conservation measures. You're seeing nowadays lighting issues, the compact fluorescent lights, very energy efficient lighting systems, lighting controls. And as I mentioned before, Energy Star appliances. You go into an appliance store, regardless of what it is, the big box stores, and the first thing you look for is it an Energy Star? And so that's an important thing. So the first concept is that you have core energy conservation measures. The second concept is what we talk about, advanced energy conservation measures, which are more experimental or difficult items to deal with, like fuel conversions from electricity to gas, or conversion technologies like energy management systems, or other energy saving technology and renewable systems like solar, geothermal. I was even flying over New England recently, and I noticed a whole bunch of, guess what? Windmills. Mm-hmm. Wind power is becoming a big issue now. And so these are more advanced types of items. So what the rule says is that your energy audit must, at minimum, address the core ECMs and have a summary of the findings, have an assessment of the energy-related physical components within the core ECMs. It's going to have an assessment of the operating and maintenance and resident education issues relative to energy conservation and green measures. It's going to have an analysis of the fuel, the electric, and the water usage for Housing Authority held accounts, which are Housing Authority paid utilities. That's the way the regs talk about them. It also has to identify the cost-effective energy conservation measures. Now, that sort of brings us to an issue of what the heck we mean by cost-effective energy conservation measures. We just talked about the fact that energy conservation measures reduce consumption, right? So having said that, we actually have an answer for this one. The old rule, and the guidebook I think that we talked about had what's described as a payback period. In other words, if I'm saving $10 a month on my toilet, how long does it take me to pay back the cost of installing the new toilet, the new energy conservation measure? So when you talk about the whole issue of energy audits and an energy conservation measure, the question is payback. How long does it take to pay it back? And that's what we consider to be a cost-effective energy conservation measure. The rule breaks it down into 3 categories. So you're going to have 5 years or less, 5 to 10, or greater than 10 years. So this gives you a sense of proportion because not all payback periods are the same. It gives you a sense of proportion where you can see the shorter term payback periods, the longer term payback periods, and it allows you to make your own strategic decisions in terms of which one of these ECMs do I want to incorporate. And so the choice is yours because you have the data to do it. And you're going to have the data through this new energy audit that we're talking about. The energy audit will also address core ECMs and projected costs of the ECMs and the incremental cost of the ECMs. It needs to also address projected cost savings in water consumption, projected annual savings in both consumption and dollars. And the notion of looking at both consumption and dollars is important because most of the initial calculations are based on the consumption. So we look at the toilet, we look at a 6-gallon toilet, we look at a 1.6, and we're saving somewhere under 4 gallons or thereabouts. The question is and that's probably going to be relatively standard throughout the life cycle of the toilet, but the cost may vary over time. As you know, your utility costs change. So you need to think about both the level of consumption as well as the cost. We need to think about the expected useful life for any of the recommended energy conservation measures and green measures. We talked about that on the GP&A, so you also have to think about that as well for your energy audit. Life cycle cost or savings of the ECMs need to be thought about, as well as disposal costs and maintenance costs. You need to identify elements, not necessarily the quantification of the elements. The energy audit must also address any related physical improvements that may go along. We keep talking about toilets, so that you're in a bathroom, you want to replace these old 6-gallon toilets, right? What about the flooring? A lot of times you go into bathrooms where there's been a lot of water leaks. You may have had termite infestations, mold, all sorts of things. And so you may have to replace the floor. Well, the floor isn't an energy conservation measure, but that's a cost that you have to think about. So that's why we talk about things like related physical improvements. You also need to consider reliable data from previous audits that may carry over, so you don't necessarily want to reinvent the wheel. You need to differentiate between energy conservation measures that are routine operating and maintenance versus those that are capital, because that's an important issue on the capital fund, because you're not supposed to use capital funds for routine maintenance. So we talked about the timing of this, and the timing of the energy audit is going to flow into the timing of the GP&A. So now we've talked about the GP&A, we've talked about the energy audit, the 2 rules, those are coming out. When they come out, we anticipate that they were published as separate rules. We anticipate that they will come out as a single final rule, so you only have to deal with 1 rule. In terms of implementation, HUD has hired a firm called Econometrica, Inc. To support implementation of both the GP&A and the energy audit rule. Econometrica will provide technical assistance to headquarters, HUD headquarters and the field office, as well as housing authorities and the GP&A providers. The assistance will be technical assistance in terms of assisting in the actual GP&A and the energy audit, answering questions, providing training on the GP&A and the energy audit. Examples of the training, we have the training that's going to be held today. We're going to have a second webinar on February 27th of 2013. So you want to pay attention for when that comes up so that you can have more staff becoming involved in this. At the current schedule, we have a live training session scheduled for February 6th, which is just around the corner, so you might want to think about that. So Econometrica is working on the training components for implementing the GP&A and the energy audit requirements. They're also going to be preparing web-based technical assistance for housing authorities. They're going to have frequently asked questions that are going to be regularly updated, and though we've got a set that should be ready fairly soon to go on the web.
December 13th. Set was sent to all the housing authorities.
They have
the first set.
The first set. You sent those by email?
By email.
Okay, so we have the first wave of FAQs that have gone out. Should help you. Those will be posted on the web as well. We have an email-based Q's and A's system, and we'll be tracking questions and answers through that system. The Econometrica will also provide quality control once the GP&As are done. So the GP&As are, as I mentioned before, you're going to get an extract. It's going to come up, it's going to be emailed. That's correct. Email an extract to an email address. Then that extract is going to be compared against PIC to make sure that the PIC and the GP&A data is correct. And then we're going to do some QA on the data that's in there. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So there's going to be analysis of the data to make sure, again, part of the issue is we want reliable and correct data for both your purposes and HUD's purposes for implementing the program. There will be an issue resolution tracking system, so we make sure all of the issues get resolved. So they're going to be tracked. We're going to be looking, QCing both the questions and the answers, so we make sure that that's done in a reasonable way. Upon publication of the final rule, housing authorities will complete the P&As and the energy audits. Housing, as I mentioned before, housing authorities can hire out the process if they want or do it in-house. Now, on the website where the GP&A software is located, there is a user's guide. And we'll show you where that is as well. The user's guide, in the back of it, has a model statement of work so that if you want to take a look at it, it's not mandatory. It's just a model for you to look at. That's been prepared. You can take a look at that. That'll give you at least a starting point if you want to contract out your GP&A for your housing authority. You've heard this one before. Prior to getting the effective date of the final rule, you want to start prepping yourself. And today is not too early to get started. So what are the types of things that you might want to do in terms of getting ready for this P&A to show up on your door? You know, because our friends at the field offices are going to be asking you, once we get these effective dates set into place, where is it? And we're going to be tracking that. So what are the types of things that you can do? Well, you need to make sure that the staff of the housing authority is familiar with the GP&A requirements and that it's a team effort, because this GP&A touches virtually every aspect of the housing authority. So that at the executive level, the executive director and the board members, this is an important activity for them. It's going to provide them with important information for them to make executive level decisions. It's going to be important for your property managers and your maintenance staff, because it's going to affect the level of maintenance of your property, which is very important. It may affect your housing authority architect and or your engineer, because as you begin moving forward after you've done the GP&A and the energy audit, they need to be aware of what your priorities are that were included in the GP&A. So that's important. Information technology. We're going to be emailing stuff. We're going to have XML spreadsheets, data files, various other things, so you're going to need to involve them. Finance, accounting, and procurement. That's all going to play into this because we're talking about cost estimating. How are we going to use our capital funds, that sort of issues. And so that finance and a budget, you're going to be contracting out maybe the GP&A, so your procurement process has to be involved in it. All of this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So you need to be able to educate your staff in terms of what this whole process is. What did I say before? Pick building and unit data characteristics. Make sure it's right. So you can start right now, as Bruce was suggesting. Send the email in to phapna@hud.gov and ask for the PIC data extract so you can get it. You can make sure that it synchronizes with your property profile, and you're that much further ahead. You need to become familiar with the GP&A software itself. You need to go to the HUD website, download the software, open it up. It doesn't require a rocket scientist to be able to do this. I was able to go on the web, download it, open it up, and navigate it around without any instructions. So I don't want you to feel like, you know, only my architect can do this. Your executive director can do it, your deputy executive director can do it, your property manager, your maintenance guys, they can all do this. Having said that, go to the website, download the software, download the user's guide that we had for you. We have on our screen there the website locations. So download the user's guide. As I mentioned before, we have the sample statement of work that you can use to help do your solicitations. And again, that one is not mandatory. The GP&A is going to require some sampling. The UPCS inspections, your annual unit and system inspections that you normally do, you have to do 100%. On the GP&A, you're going to use the sampling methodology that was in the HUD Modernization Standards Handbook. And largely it was a minimum of 10%, but you had to take into consideration different building types, different structure types, different unit sizes. So it's not necessarily just a flat 10%, it's a minimum of 10%. But you need to sit down up front and think about each amp and how you're going to do your sampling size. So you need to take a look at that. You need to think about the fact that you also have non-dwelling spaces, and you're going to need to survey that as well. The amount of survey of your non-dwelling spaces is going to depend on whether or not you think that there's largely all of your non-dwelling spaces are the same. If they're relatively the same all around, you probably only need to look at about 10% of them. If there's a lot of variation, then you're probably going to need to look at more, maybe as much as 100%. The more you look at, the more data you've captured, and there's less likely that you're going to miss work items that need to be accomplished. If you don't put things in here, it's not going to be considered when the housing authority thinks about what work needs to be done. You don't want to artificially inflate or deflate the P&A. You want it to be accurate and you want it to be reliable because it's your tool. It's your tool to help in your strategic planning. Housing authorities, in terms of your role, need to be thinking about the sampling, as I mentioned, the data collection needs. Housing authorities will have to collect various types of documentation in addition to the architectural data noted above. For your energy audit, you're going to need to collect at least 1 year of energy bills so you can do an analysis. 3 years would be better if we can get 3 years. I know, getting utility bills is sometimes a little difficult. You need to be able to get copies of any of your previous audits, any of your previous P&As, energy performance contracts that you've done where you've gotten a energy audit, 504 work that you may have done, maintenance logs, any drawings that you have available because they're going to help you in terms of doing some of the architectural takeoffs. Any bids for major work that you currently have, because that's going to give you a sense of, if you're using the commercial cost indices, it'll give you a sense in terms of whether or not the commercial cost indices is relatively accurate in your jurisdiction. You may also want to take a look at your P&Es in terms of where you are in terms of the current work. UPCS inspections are going to give you a sense of what's broken right now. These are types of things that you want to think about. As you prepare for completing and submitting the P&A to HUD, I mentioned this 4 or 5 times already. You're going to have to devote a lot of time to this, particularly for the first one. After we get the first one done, it's going to be easier as you get further down the pike. But this is going to require a certain level of investment on your part. And so you need to start now. You need to get up to speed in terms of the training material that we're going to provide for housing authorities, the software that's on the web, the user's guide that's on the web, the FAQs that are on the web. Get started now. And if you do the GP&A right, and that's where I was talking about the fact that you need to, the GP&A needs to be accurate. And you don't want it to be too inflated. You don't want it to be deflated. Going through it fast and not picking up things is not going to help you. The whole key is that this tool is going to help you in the future making your long-term planning decisions, because we have financial issues in terms of what your backlog is, what the appropriations are, without being judgmental. They are what they are. So you need to think about where you want your housing authority to go with your public housing properties. And this will give you the data to do that. Last item I think I have on my agenda for before we take a break. I think it's the last item, pretty close to it. I mentioned this before. Your field offices will be your first point of contact on all things GP&A, on all things energy audit. You have questions, you need to go to the field office, have the conversation with them. If the field offices need further advice and guidance, they will come to us, Econometrica and headquarters. We'll help them out, we'll get the answer, and they'll get back to you. It's important that that you have this good working relationship with the field offices, because this is not like ARA. ARA came, it was here for a year, and now it's gone. This is here to stay. Property managers out in the private market do physical needs assessment all the time. They have this ongoing need to maintain their property. They go out and they get private financing all of the time. What do they do as a function of the private financing? They're going to do a physical needs assessment, because the bank's going to know, what are you going to use the money for? And so that's why this effort is very important. It's long-term, and you need to develop this working relationship with your field office to make sure that they know and you know you're on top of this. We have our email address that I talked about a little bit before, which is phapna@hud.gov. If you have questions about what we covered in the last hour, hour and a half, however long it's been, please email your questions to phapna@hud.gov. At this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we want to take a little bit of a break.
Yes.
In case you need to go down to the hall for whatever the reason is. Take 5 minutes, because we've got more to come. More exciting stuff.
More exciting stuff. And I have a couple of little points because I'm monitoring email as it's coming in.
And you're also thinking on patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time.
Slides. People are asking if the presentation is available. And yes, if you email to phapna@hud.gov, this afternoon and evening, a copy of the slides will be sent to you. So just send a request to that email account, and that'll be sent out. And also, the web page will be instructing in the second part of the presentation on how to get to the web page and what's on there. But a lot of the information is available on the web page now. If you want to do it in the break, you just go to HUD.gov, type in physical needs assessment in the search block, and you'll get there fairly quickly. But we will also review that in the second section. And any questions that you have that you want us to cover in the second half, please be sending those in now.
Because after you come back from going down the hall, and hopefully during that 5-minute period, all of you guys are going to be thinking about your questions and going to phapna@hud.gov, and you're going to be submitting your questions. When we come back, we'll try and answer those questions that you sent in as a result of this session from this morning. And then we'll move on to our demonstration of the GPNA software. Okay, it's time for your break now. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to the Green Physical Needs Assessment webinar training for today. We have a couple other gentlemen who have joined us that are going to help us in the rest of the demonstration that we'll have in a couple of minutes. To my left is Mr. Ed Kramer, and beside him is Mr. Marv Goldstein of both of BISCO, company that does inspections, REACT type inspections and home inspections, that sort of thing, and they've been working with us on the Green Physical Needs Assessment process. So, having said that, there are a couple of you who have taken my request to heart to send in questions to phapna.hud.gov, and we have a couple already for us to answer, right, Bruce?
Yes, many questions.
Ask one.
And just to reiterate, the slides are available by emailing to this the same email address, and your PIC data. Some of people are asking for their PIC data update, and that's also available at this address as well. So one question near and dear to my heart that came in was, can we submit our PNAs early before the rule is published? And I guess I'll pick that one up. We have already received several. Yes, that is that was our intention. That's why the rule provided that up to 2 years in advance of the publication date, we could accept P&A data for that period of time, because we have always known that there have been a lot of housing authorities that have been very anxious to get going on this. So yes, in fact, it could be submitted prior to the final rule being in place. Being fair, that always presents a risk that there could be some last-minute change in the rule when it becomes published that would affect the submission. I'm not seeing that at the moment, but it is always a possibility out there.
Again, assuming they're using the HUD P&A software.
And using the software and
doing everything that we talked about today,
right,
and that's included in the user's guide and all that sort of thing.
And the ancillary question to that is, where can they find the provisional rules or proposed rules?
That is on the HUD Capital Fund Physical Needs Assessment website, which we'll show them where that is in a couple of minutes.
Link, yes.
Yes. So we got that one. That's
okay.
the first one. Next question.
So we have a housing authority who has done a very thorough job recently, since 2010, of doing a capital needs assessment for their inventory and doing going forward with an EPC on at least a portion of their inventory. I didn't get into that detail. So their question comes, if I'm paraphrasing, what do I need to do to address this requirement, since I have all of that done?
I would tend to say the first thing that jumps to the top of my head is that we need to take a look at the P&A that you've got completed now and compare it to the P&A software, because I'm assuming that the P&A was done in some other venue other than the P&A software.
Given the date, it would
so
have to.
So that if that P&A that you had done was for a 20-year period that considered life cycle analysis, that did current costs and life cycle costs, that can certainly be used. That should be able to be put into the GPNA software, and I don't see why we would not accept it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah, and as we covered the tool software, there are features in the HUD GPNA tool that will ease you entering your existing data, and we'll cover those briefly during the demo.
Okay, so yeah, if you've already done one, meets all of our requirements, then you should be able to use that.
I think Marv had some other.
Yeah, as the regulations now stand, it's my understanding that energy data is good for up to 3 years. So any energy data that was gathered 3 years and 1 day from now in 2010 would not be usable, and you would have to gather new energy data. Likewise, your life expectancies, your EULs, your RULs are good for 2 years. So the data that you gathered in 2010 could be referred to as the basis. For instance, if you haven't changed a hot water heater in the last 3 years, and 3 years ago you said it was 7 years old, well, now you would say it's 10 years old. So you could use that as reference, but all that data needs to be entered into the tool and be adjusted for the time lag.
And Mark, you've hit on the key. Regardless of what you've done previously, everything, the submittal to HUD has to be in through the tool. The reason being is that for the piece of the data that we collect, the tool creates the way for us to aggregate the information and to use it effectively. So the submission via the tool is the form and manner prescribed by HUD according to the rule and according to the error submission. So there are mechanisms in the tool where you can transfer data directly into the tool. If you already have a 20-year spreadsheet, you can enter that information directly into the tool without actually having to do new inspections, so to speak. So there are mechanisms to facilitate that condition.
Well, there's a way to do it.
Yes.
And I think sort of going with Marv's thoughts, the other thing I was thinking about is maybe their P&A didn't go up to 20 years.
Correct.
You guys tell me, you could, if you had the data based on installation, effective useful life, effective remaining life, project out so that you can put the data in the tool so it can project out the 20 years needed.
Yeah, but you need to be careful, because if you're talking, and I think the question that the questioner originally raised was data from 2010.
Right.
2010, you can impute the EUL, the estimated useful life, because that's a rated useful life using things like Fannie Mae guidelines. However, you cannot impute 3 years later the RUL, because a hot water heater, which maybe you thought had a 5-year expectancy 3 years ago, may have failed in the last 3 years, or may need, you may look at it and say, boy, it's rumbling, it's making lots of noise, this is ready to go any day. You may have a new RUL after 3 years. So you have to be careful with imputing 3-year-old data.
In other words, the longer time goes on, the less accurate that data is going to be.
Correct.
I think.
And I think the summary is that for housing authorities that have done that very good, effective, long-term planning already, that work is not wasted, is certainly transferable into the tool and to this effort, and is going to be useful, but maybe not in its entirety. You may have to have some supplemental work done to bring it up to date. So the question comes, and I'm thinking this one comes to me, when will the rule be final?
Everybody wants to know.
I'm not even sure it goes to you as much as it is.
Unfortunately, I just, I cannot, give a definite date.
Your crystal ball's a little foggy.
Really constrained from being able to report where it is in the process, but it is absolutely in the final review stages. As should be no mystery, and I don't think I'm divulging anything everybody doesn't know, the capital fund rule that you referenced earlier is also being revised. These rules that refer to the physical needs assessment and the energy audit become a part of that capital fund rule. So exactly. So they are actually following directly behind it. So maybe a good marker is the minute you see the capital fund rule published, be looking for these, because they're right behind it. They become a part of it. But really, until the capital fund rule is final, these can't go forward. So that gives you a little clues what to look for, even though I'm not able or at liberty to give you any precise dates.
Until it's published, we can't require it.
Right.
If you want to do it ahead of time and you're heeding our advice, and you're getting ready and doing this stuff right now, which is what you should be doing.
So if the context of the question is, so how definite are these rules? Again, the proposed rules were published over a year ago now, both of the rules.
It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when.
Right. And so the proposed rules are out there. The comments are actually still available to look at. If you were curious, you could look at the comments and make your own determination as to, well, how many comments really were there that would affect the final rule. So there are things that you could do to make your own assessments, but I couldn't really advise you one way or the other. But the proposed rules are certainly out there to review, and I believe remain a good guide.
And the simple answer is soon.
Right. Yes. And the point that I was trying to make, but didn't complete, was that in the proposed rule process, all of the same entities that review the rule in final have already reviewed them when proposed. So it's the same people reviewing the same rule. So one could, deduce that most of the major things.
One would think that most,
but
yeah, right.
Again, as before,
You can't predict.
we cannot predict what would be in a final rule for sure. The current EPC question. Someone asked a question, a very specific question about the tool that maybe I'll hold that till later, till you're in your part, and maybe answer it there, because it might be easier to show rather than to try to describe. Sample audits, energy audits. A question came up, are there sample audits? What does an energy audit look like, I guess is the question. Does anybody want to grab that one?
Well, that sort of raises a point that I guess I may have neglected to share with you folks, which is we have GP&A software that you're required to use. We do not, I repeat, we do not have energy audit software or a template that you are required to use. As you go into the energy audit rule, there are a number of things that you saw on the PowerPoint slides. It talks about that the energy audit must consider the core ECMs, and it discussed the things that have to be addressed. And so all of those things that are in the slide are out of the rule. So your energy audit has to include those things. We do not have a template for it. We do not have software for it. So that's the answer to the question. Good, bad, or different.
So we're right.
Right.
There are many different formats out there.
Right.
We're not dictating or mandating
As
any
long as you
particular
meet the
one.
requirements of the reg.
Right. The questioner notes that, and has been in the tool and has noted that the tool, and you'll show us later, lists a lot of specific components. And the question is, do housing authorities have to look at all of those specific components? And the further question to that is, if our housing authority replaces certain components, say on the operating side of the house as maintenance or unit turnover, rather than as a capital expenditure, do we need to reflect it in this tool?
Let me do the last one.
Okay.
First, and then you guys do the other one. Remember I mentioned that you do your GP&A, you do it for a 5-year period, you submit it. On an annual basis, if you correct things or you fix things that are identified in your GP&A, that's going to be reflected in the annual update. It's going to identify the item, the cost, and I believe the source of funds. So we don't really care where you got the money, although it's an information piece.
Right.
So on the second half of the question, the fact that you're using your operating funds to pay for it, which is an eligible expense, doesn't really matter. You still, because the question for you is what do I need to do to my inventory? And you've identified this item in your GP&A. So in order to have current data for yourself to make decisions on, you would want to reflect that item that you did. And you just reflect the source of funds being the operating fund. So,
yeah. Another important thing to consider is that the inspector who is doing this inspection, whether the inspector is an employee of the housing authority or a contract inspector, is required to inspect a sufficient sample of each unit type, building, and property system to be able to state with confidence that the present and probable future conditions of the total property are estimated accurately in the GP&A.
okay.
Okay. I found one that I wanted to definitely, and now I've lost it. Because I was thinking of the one I had to answer. Okay, so I'll do this one. If the Housing Authority fiscal year, if my fiscal year end is September 30th, when is my GP&A tool due? It's a very good question. So again, there are 4 due dates. So the due date that falls 120 days before 9/30/13 would be the due date. And I don't have the chart with me, but actually the summary is in the December 13th memo that was sent to all housing authorities. So that would be the July 2nd due date.
July 2nd.
And since at this point in time, July 2nd is too soon, the very earliest yours is going to be due with a 9/30 fiscal year end is going to be July 2014. So just start from the example that we gave earlier, which is a December 31st start date due September 1st, and then just advance to each of the next 4 dates to get your particular projected potential due dates as of today, again, all based on the rule publication date.
Right, to get a sense of when is it likely going to be due from a date-specific date, understanding that we don't know when the final rule is going to come out. And when the final rule does come out, you want to confirm exactly what your date is. And when that does occur, we'll have a schedule on the web for you so you can see what your date is. And so that it won't be any magic, it won't be hidden, it'll be well known to you, it'll be on our web. The field offices will have it. I'm sure the field offices are going to let you know that you have to have it in by that date. And they're probably also going to ask you on that date, did you send it? They're probably going to want confirmation. So that there's several ways of this that you'll get a sense of when you're going to have it, to have to submit it.
Bottom line, the December 31st and the March 31st housing authorities are the ones who should be particularly concerned and really be working right now towards this, because if this rule is finalized in 30 days from now, they're the ones who will have to immediately start producing their GP&As.
Question came in, is this compatible with Mac? No, it isn't. It's a Windows basically compatible product. And very good question about the use of the cost library. Does the tool allow for different costs for different building types for the same component? Do you want to?
Yes, you can actually, per development, you can change the cost library. You can have an overall one for the project, but you can modify the cost library per building, and development.
Well, so you can have a separate cost library for each amp.
Each amp or each building type?
And you can also, within each cost library, add lines and customize each cost.
And I think that's an important component, because we have a lot of public housing projects in the inventory that may have high rises and then walk-ups in the same project. So you're going to want, in order to have accurate and reliable data, you're going to want to have the segregation.
It's a very flexible tool from that point of view.
Okay. So, pick a question.
I like pick.
Right. The basic
So-
question is a
so
couple
do
of
you-
people have asked, what happens if while I'm working with the tool or during the time I'm working with the tool, my pick data changes in that interim period of time? What happens to me is the question. Are you-
Well, the the answer is that it has to synchronize.
Right.
And so if you went in and changed your pick data and then started your GPNA, but you downloaded the pick data before you changed it, you need to I would think that you would need to re-download the current pick data and then do your GPNA from there.
Yeah,
Because when it comes back up to us, up to HUD, it's going to, red lights and sirens and stuff will go off.
The Housing Authority controls this to a certain extent in that they will probably originate the request for the change in the pick data. And so if the Housing Authority contracts with someone or has their own personnel doing a GPNA, and during the GPNA, while the process is ongoing, the Housing Authority requests an adjustment in the pick data, and then has that pick data approved by HUD as the new approved pick data, then when the Housing Authority goes to upload the inspection in accordance with the old pick data, it will be automatically rejected. So they have to make sure that if they request a pick data adjustment, that the GPNA data reflects that adjustment as it is officially accepted by HUD.
Yeah, just a couple points. One, at any point you can export everything you have out of your existing GPNA. So if you did have to start anew, you could export what you have in your old one and import it into a new one. And then also you do have the capability in the program of adding buildings and units and things. It's a can of worms, you're asking for trouble, but if you have a giant enterprise, and if you carefully add one unit in pick and one unit in the program, you'll likely get away with
I
it.
think the answer is to be mindful of when you download your pick data for the purposes of doing your GPNA, and then making any changes to pick until you've uploaded your completed GPNA. So be very mindful of that.
2 quick add-ons, because it will be an issue for many housing authorities.
Correct.
As with anything, it probably is a matter of degree. A unit here or there, 1 or 2 units, there are potential workarounds that could easily be done. The second point I wanted to make sure is that when we're talking about pick data for purposes of the GPNA tool, we're talking about inventory data. So it's not occupancy data, it's not change in tenancies, it's none of that side of pick data. It is only the number of units, the number of buildings, the DOFA dates, the basic inventory quantity data, nothing to do with the tenant side of it or the occupancy side of it. So, because we know that changes a lot more frequently, certainly, than the inventory side. That's what's validated against when it comes to HUD.
Okay, I think probably at this juncture we want to move on to the next section of our presentation. Mr. Ed Kramer is going to do a demonstration for us of the GPNA software, and so I'll turn it over to him.
He needs to move.
Oh, we're going to take a break?
I think we take a break.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
My apologies, folks. We're going to take a quick break, and then as you can see on the screen, we will go into the software and give you some pointers in terms of let you see how it looks and where you can download it from. So we'll take another 5-minute break. I wasn't paying attention to my own schedule for a change. And so go down the hall, come back in 5 minutes, and we'll get back to work here. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everybody, to the HUD Capital Fund GPNA webinar. Now we can, at this juncture, go back to Mr. Ed Kramer from BISCO. He's going to do a live demonstration so we can see where a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about for the last 2 hours is located on the web, and to be able to see the software so that you're going to get a little bit better understanding of what this is all about, this GPNA that we've been talking about. Ed?
Hello, everyone. This is the fun and exciting part of the presentation that Mr. Thorson talked about this morning. First, we're going to cover in a few parts, but first we're going to go to the HUD website and actually show you where to get the software, where to get the user's guide, and how to get going with using this product. But before we do, we just want to reiterate a few things, just in case you didn't hear it this morning. It's very important before you start that your pick data is correct. We had mentioned that there's things you can do right now, and that's number one on your list to do right now. Get your pick data, make sure it's correct, and that will make things much easier when it's time for you to actually start. And then, it's updated every 2-3 weeks, so once you submit changes, you probably want to wait 2-3 weeks to download a blank version of the program to actually start it. In the meanwhile, there is a version of the program online which will show you how to get, where you can just play with it now just to get a feel for the program and to understand how it works and what kind of things you're going to need. And then, first thing, the important thing, of course, critical thing to check with the pick data is that all your buildings are in there, they're in the right amps, and all your units are in there. Now, the actual tool, to use it successfully to meet the regulatory requirements, you really only have to gather 4 pieces of data on each item. One is the EUL, or estimated useful life, and that's what you would enter in the cost library. And again, you would probably get that from an industry standard like Means is one, but there's plenty other ones you can use. And then the cost per unit is you also enter in the cost library, and you can adjust it for local costs. And then the other 2 essential elements for your actual inspection are the RUL, or remaining useful life, which is based on your inspection and your inspector's expertise, and then the takeoff amount, which is the amount that you have of that item. And that's why we've mentioned gathering your architectural drawings and any other previous reports, and that's will be the most time-consuming part the first time you do one of these. Okay, as we mentioned too, you don't have to actually inspect each building and unit, but there is a sampling model, and the first time I'll mention this. This demonstration is a relatively short, simple demonstration. There's an excellent hour-and-a-half video prepared by Mr. Ryder online that will give you a much more comprehensive view through the program and how to use it, and that will also cover the sampling. Then the other essential thing, which we'll show you as soon as we go to the website, is the user guide. And that, again, on the list of things you can do right away, you can go to the website right now, put a copy in your desktop, maybe print one out, and there's going to be a lot of things answered there we're not going to cover today. Okay, with that said, now we're ready to jump. We're just, at HUD.gov. So, from any computer, just go to HUD.gov, and then in the search box in the top right-hand corner, you can just put GPNA as a good search term, and that will bring you to the first thing on the list currently that's been coming up quite a while when you search that way, is the Green Physical Needs tool page. I'm going to click on that. Okay, now this is the basis for where you're going to get everything you need to get started. Now on the page here, under Prototype Populated Tool, that's the version you can download to play with, and there's nothing you can do wrong in there. There's nothing you're going to submit in there, and you can just download it, plug things in, try to mess it up, and also notice there's installation instructions, which we found most people don't need. It really is simple to install, and actually we're going to install it live right in front of you now to show you how simple it is. Then also this is where you would get the user guide, and the user guide is a PDF document that you can save to your desktop. You can print it out and just generally have fun with it. A little further down the page, it says PHA tool for use. When you're ready to actually start, this is the one you'll download, and there's nothing in there. You can have both on your computer at the same time. There's no issue with having both versions going, so you can have your play version and your real one going, and same download instructions. But to get started right now, we're going to actually show you downloading the live program. So we're right here where it says green PNA link. We're just going to click on that. We're going to open it. It's around another minute to download. At home, this downloaded in seconds for me, so this is...
I think we're on the HUD system. It depends what time of day.
Right.
Just how long things take to load up.
Well, you know, most cable systems that advertise internet usage, they give you a choice of low, medium, and high speed download. And so we got to make sure we get you guys on the high speed download.
Well, one point I could make, while it's now it'll finish up, is that what you're doing here in loading the tool is this process that we're about to go through and is actually an installation. It installs some software on your computer so that you do not have to have special software. For those of you that have better software, some of you have Microsoft Access, and you know that that's a Microsoft product. If you do not own Microsoft Access software, you don't need it because you're installing the tool and installing a piece of software that allows you to use it without owning that software. So that's just, for the technical people, why are we downloading it? That's why. So because of that installation needs to occur so that everyone doesn't have to buy it.
Okay, now notice it left us, we didn't have to go look for the program. It left us right where it downloaded. And we're just going to click Setup. And it's just a simple wizard that will guide you right through. Typical installation. Install. You don't have to worry about where it installs because it's going to put a link right on your desktop. And again, we could have pre-done this, but we just want to show you how simple and fast it is in real time.
And the steps that most housing authorities will actually go through.
In other words,
To
you
put it
don't
on
need
the
to
first
have a
time.
rocket scientist do this.
Yeah. Again, it's putting a free runtime version of Access on your computer. Geez, it's taking longer than it's ever taken.
Yes, I know. It's a busy day here today, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, installation is complete and successful. Okay, now we're going to go out to our desktop, and you'll see on your desktop now there's now an icon called Green PNA. Now, at the same time, the other version, which we're going to go to later, but we're not going to bother downloading again, will show up on your desktop this way. It's called GPNA Anonymous 61412. Nice, snappy name, but that's the version with the data. But notice, like I said, they can simultaneously cohabitate your computer with no issues.
Right, and what you're saying there is that version that you just put over there has dummy data in
Right.
it. That you can pull it up, you can take a look at it just to see what a completed one looks like before you actually go in and start entering in your own information.
Right.
And I did find that helpful to be able to see a GPNA that was already completed.
Okay, now.
Yeah, more info,
It just,
right?
Yeah, just, oops.
Yeah, it worked a minute ago.
Okay, where did I go? Okay, now you might see this screen, and basically you can just close it. You know, it doesn't create any issues.
Right. So some people will see that the tool was developed in Microsoft Access 2007 or 2010, so it is current to the current version of Microsoft Access, but it would give us this compatibility message, but all the compatibility has been rectified or reconciled in the tool. So it is compatible with Access 2010 for those that run
Yeah,
it.
and don't worry about that error message again. Okay, so this is the opening screen you'll see every time. Notice there's two places you can go. One is called the dashboard and one's called the control panel. The dashboard you can go to any time, and that gives you a running tally of everything you entered in real time. And then the other side is control panel where you enter all the information. One important thing we should do before we even get started in this program, let me point out a couple things that will increase your satisfaction greatly. All navigating in this program is done through these buttons at the bottom. Never use the Windows controls. You know, the program's just not designed that way, and you'll frustratingly be closing yourself out of the program a lot if you make the mistake of trying to navigate using either these basic Windows controls or the minimize and maximize controls. Notice this is absolutely blank, and for the first time you would just do an import pick data, and the first time in there, and again this will already be sent to you after you request it from HUD, and it will come in the form, I'll show you.
Of an XML. I put
An
two
XML
on the
file.
desktop.
Oh, they're on the desktop,
Uh-huh.
okay. Okay, so yeah, we'll
There you
probably
go.
pretty much follow this naming convention.
Right. So just to stop there, in this example, you may not be able to see it, but the naming convention is it'll have your PHA number, and then it will have the date that the data set was created. Not necessarily the pick date, but the date that the set was created.
And this XML file will have all projects, AMPs of a housing authority.
Right.
Right. Okay, there we go. Just that quick. It was imported. It's populated. Now, another very important thing with this program is every time you leave a screen, most screens you have to do a save and close on, or again, you're wasting your time.
Right.
So, okay.
I don't do
But that was just to show you, how you would get started. Okay, but now we're actually going to jump. Show you. So you notice it populated all the amps, and
double click on that amp so
okay.
they can see. So once that amps are populated, if you double click on any one of those, it gives you this level of information, which is you can see all your buildings that are in that amp, all the units that are in that amp, So it saves, for anyone doing a physical needs assessment, the fact that your inventory of data automatically is populated saves a big step at the beginning of this process.
Right. Then also, this is another thing to notice. Notice, like this energy data, audit data, addresses. There's all kinds of information that you can store within this program. You can make this your central repository of organizational data if you wish. You know, as we go into each line item of things you can inspect, you can even reach the level of putting model and serial numbers, locations, pictures. You can attach documents like PDF users guides. You know, you have an immense amount of information you can put in here. But with that said, there's two very important points we need to make. Number one is the only information that goes to HUD is the top line summaries of your estimated costs and of the four basic pieces of information we mentioned. Anything else you put in here is for your use, and it does not go to HUD. Then the other point that we haven't raised yet, which is, you know, you're going to spend hundreds of man hours, maybe thousands, putting information into this system. And as we mentioned, HUD only gets the top line data, so you are absolutely responsible to make sure that you protect this data, that you have it backed up, probably in multiple places in multiple ways. And you know, it's going to be a major investment, and you have to protect it. And HUD cannot help you if you have it on one computer and that computer crashes. You wasted a lot of money. So you know, it's essential that you understand how to back this up and protect the data. Okay, now, okay, with that said, I'm going to get out of this one, and I'm going to go into the anonymous, yep. Okay, there we go. Now this is the anonymous one that has the data that you can play with and look around and learn to use the program with. So first I'm going to go to the dashboard. Again, you know, we normally have to clear this one message, and you can just say enable this content. That does not happen on every computer. You know, it depends on how the security is set up on the computer. Okay, now we're going to continue the dashboard. And as this one already is populated with a fair amount of data from other people playing with it, you can see at any point you can go here, you can get a running tally of your needs, and you'll notice we'll just briefly cover some of the things that are available. You know, it breaks it down by component. Again, these are the 20-year figures, but you can break down by category, by the component, by year. Then you can generate different graphs. And then also from here, notice you can get to the reports menu. And you can also get there from the other side of the program too, but when you're all done, this is where you're going to come, and you're going to report all aggregates, export all aggregates to XML, and you have to do one of these for each development ramp and send them to HUD, and that's your final product when you're done. But of course, that's premature.
And that's where you would remember I mentioned the fact that you have to provide information about your P&A to your residents and resident advisory boards. And so you would use these reports, either the summary and by AMPS, so that you can provide those reports to the residents and the resident advisory board and to the board members itself.
Okay, now we jump to the control panel. This is the data entry side. And when you first start, you're going to click on Edit EUL Index List. And this is where, if you've bought a commercial index, you would import that information, and this is to populate your master cost library. Okay, now I'm going to pick first development here. Now, one other thing, well, actually, let me, I'll keep proceeding through this way. One important thing to note, which can be a little confusing, on the standard computer format, this is what you're likely to see, but at the bottom of the screen, I'm scrolling down, are essential things that you need to get to. If you're going to edit an AMP or add a development or AMP. Again, these features are here, but they're probably not recommended to use in a general type situation as far as adding developments and adding units. Again, you should get the proper download from PIC is the way to do it. Now, notice there's no inspection options or things on any of these yet, because you have to work across, and first you have to look at the sites, and then within the sites, okay, let's go down here, and we're going to edit this site. Okay, again, these are all things that can be populated. Now we're going.
And I think you saw on that last thing that I was describing to you, the types of architectural takeoff items like the gross square feet and those types of things. And so that's why you have to do a lot of prep work to be able to enter that data in there.
Right. Now we'll take one sample item here just to walk you through it. Again, this is we're in the cost library side, and this is where at the minimum you have to enter the site takeoff, which is the quantity you have of something. It can be linear feet, square feet per each. The remaining useful life, which you probably got from the cost index. But as Marvin mentioned earlier thing, Department of Agriculture, there's different sources for that data besides the commercial indexes. Now, notice there's a lot of other things you can populate if you have that data. And also we had mentioned, I'm going to click on the link for this item, and this is the place where you can add a description, like where on your property that is, or any other relevant information to your property. You can add other comments, the installation year, how much has been replaced and refurbished already. And this is where you would add attachments. You can put whatever information you want to store that you might find useful in your organization for that item there. And again, always make sure you save when you leave this page. And notice too, let's just jump to the bottom for 1 second where it says perform action. You can always add a new item. So let's say you have two distinctly different kinds of chain link and you want to make a new item to define the other one. You can just click there and make a whole set for that different item. I guess while we're here on this page, let's continue from here. At any point, you can print the form with your existing data. Where this might become useful is if you want to have multiple people work on the project. It is a big effort to gather all this data, so you can actually print out the forms, have one maintenance guy work on gather one set of takeoffs. You can also export to Excel. Why this is essential is we had mentioned that you can bring in data from old PNAs and other, if you have an existing PNA or existing data, you can import it into here. But if you're going to import it into here, you have to export the framework out of here first. It will only import things that were it exported itself. And I understand we're running out of time, so let me just...
And that's okay, don't worry about it.
Okay.
This is important for folks to see, so we're going to give you another minute, 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay, but notice on any form here, you can do this export and import back in. You can also print out blank forms in Excel and PDF, again, just to spread around the data gathering effort. There are parts will take more or less skill, and you can assign a lot of this takeoff work accordingly. I'm going to jump back to the control panel. Now, another essential thing we didn't cover to upload is, we mentioned the PIC data has to line up exactly. One other essential thing is every building that you have must be assigned to a building set, and then every unit must be assigned to a unit set. And so a building set is basically, all the buildings that you have that are very similar, and you have to make as many building sets as needed to cover the amount of types of building sets that you would have within a particular project. Again, I'm going to go to edit building set, and actually we already have all these buildings assigned to this building set in this development, but all buildings in your download that aren't yet assigned to a building site will show up under available buildings, and then you can, I'm going to remove this one just so I can re-add it, but then you can, you would add the buildings that fit that set. You would, basically define this set. I'm going to save and close. Now, once you defined all the types of buildings in that development, then you have to create unit sets. And again, you have to make as many as to fundamentally cover the basic type of arrangements in that property. Okay, and I think we already assigned all these units, so let me just check. You see all these are already assigned, but if you didn't have any unit assigned to a set, it would be on the available units list, and then you would move it over for that set. Common areas too, you have to create common area sets to cover all the basic things you're going to run into. The one other essential thing that I think we have to cover before we move on is this is a green PNA, and you're probably wondering, how do you enter the stuff from your energy audit? And so let's just pick this. Okay, let me go back.
I don't think so.
Okay, but under cost projections, notice at the top where it has line items, we're going to do a filter list here of sustainability needs. And this is just an example of some of the things that might show up. And then under, okay, so just compact fluorescent lights with locking pins. I'm just going to select that item. Now notice under the sustainability items, there's the place where you have your energy costs, what your cost of traditional item would be, what the energy equivalent difference is, and this is where you calculate the program calculates the payback. Any item you enter this way will show up on your final report as the main item, but also it will show up with the differences for the green item, which will present the information in a way where you can easily figure out what makes sense and what might not. Again, just this is a big world. We can't cover it this fast, but I'm going to just jump back to remind you. On the HUD page, we're just going to go GPNA from HUD.gov, and it's the first link. And you can get the user guide from here, and the user guide is the best way to get started. And also on YouTube there is a video with a live hour-and-a-half walkthrough of the entire program and all the basic features, which I strongly recommend is a very good starting place to deal with this, to learn it. I guess on that note, I guess I've covered the basics.
Okay, thank you, Ed. We appreciate it. I'm changing the flight plan a little bit, and since we already had a break not that long ago, we're going to go ahead and skip the break and go into our questions and answers. One of the things that just hit me, Ed was mentioning about the YouTube video. When I watched the YouTube video, I found it was helpful for me to have the software up at the time Bruce is going through the video so that I can click while he clicks, and that it enhances your understanding of the software and the feel of it while you're going through the process. And once you do that, I think you're going to get the same sense as the folks here that have been talking about. While it's not rocket science, it does require a good chunk of work, and I've been saying that over and over again, but it does. By the time you look at the user's guide, look at the download software, and do your architectural takeoffs and your measurements and all that stuff. So it does require some study, some work, and it can't be done overnight. So with that, I think we have a couple of questions, and we have answers for them too.
Well, no, that's okay. Can you bring the prototype tool up again? And
Sure.
maybe
Bruce has got.
can we go to the control panel?
Okay. Oops.
Yeah, down the bottom, I think.
Yeah.
I'm looking at. And maybe go to the master cost library. This was something we had talked about earlier. The master cost library is where you're going to be populating what costs will be used. You can see there's a lot of entries on this page. Remembering back to what Ed was saying initially, on the cost library page, there's really only 2 critical entries. And the critical entries are the replacement cost and the estimated useful life, how long an item is going to last when new. And this goes to one of the questions we received earlier. Recall that one of the questions we received earlier was, what is the impact of these pre-populated components? There are more components here than you will ever use. The components are only there as a suggestion. They're only there to use if they apply to you. You do not have to populate them if you don't have them. Just populate with costs the components that you use. And I also want to point out in the master cost library, Ed, if you scroll to the end of the line, say the first line, and just scroll to the end, there's an edit box. And just any old edit box, right. The edit box opens up this window. So again, to tell you and show you that each line in this P&A is editable to fit your particular circumstances. And as an example of one of the questions that came up earlier that I said we'd get to during this portion, someone said, well, there's a mistake in the tool. It has windows by square foot. Well, actually, a lot of people do measure windows by square foot and cost them by square foot, but they could also be costed as each. And this would be the page where you can actually change it to whatever it is you have. In this case, it would be the number sign. So that is by way of saying that the tool is as editable as we can make it to conform to specific conditions that exist out there in the world that are, they're all different.
Ed, while you're there at the Replace EUL, Refurbish EUL, I just wanted to clarify a statement that you made, and that is that the best place to find your EULs is not in Means or Marshall and Swift's cost library, because they just have cost information, but it is in the Fannie Mae guidelines or the USDA guidelines, which you also mentioned, but there might have been some confusion on that. So the best place to find that is in places like the Fannie Mae or USDA or other such sources, because you will not find it in Marshall and Swift or Means.
And I think National Association of Home Builders has
And
one too.
AHB has an excellent one, yes.
Right. So that's the cost library piece. And the other page we didn't hit that we might want to hit, if you go back to control panel, is the cost projection for any amp. Yeah, just hit cost projection. Oh, well, you did actually. You went there when you did the sustainability. But this is the guts. This is where you're getting to at the end of the day. These are all the calculations that the tool does for you and spreads out this cost over 20 years. This is the product you're getting to, and this is basically all populated by the 4 entries that you've made for each component, right, Ed? So you don't, it just saves you a lot of calculation time. And you know, when you're dealing with one component, you know, it's kind of an easy thing to say, okay, well, last 5 years, you can do one component. But when you're dealing with 40, 50, 60, which is probably more in the range of the normal number of components for a project such as this, it's just a tremendous savings of time to have the tool do all these calculations for you. And then the other thing to point out is, as Ed was saying before, this page can also be exported. Actually, this was in the sample, the prototype one, it wasn't, but you can, oh, there it is up at the top. You can also export it to Excel and work with it outside the tool. So this would be that, as an example, if you had an existing 20-year spread of costs from another P&A, this is how you would do it. You would export a blank Excel spreadsheet from this page. You would use that blank Excel spreadsheet to manually enter in the information that you have from the other P&A that you did, and then you'd import it back in and it would populate. You wouldn't have to do all the inspections to underlie it. You would have to make the sets, but you wouldn't have to redo all of your work. Is that a fair summary of how you would do that?
Yeah.
And I'm just remembering back to some of the questions that came in with regard to the tool. But the main thing I wanted to make sure people realize is why those components are there. They're not dictated. You don't, if you don't have them.
I think the simple version
Right.
is that this is an inventory of all the possible
Right.
components that you could have in a project.
Right.
If you have them, great. If you need to put the data in. If you don't have them, don't worry about them. Forget them. Move on to the next component.
And if you don't have one we include, you can edit. You can add your own.
Edit to add it. So there, as you said, there's a lot of flexibility in this software to enable you to make this a useful tool for yourself. I do think I see on my monitor a question. You want me to go with that one? Or you
Okay, sure.
One of the questions I've got from my monitor is, do I install a copy of the software on every computer? Not necessarily. You need to install it on the computers for people who are going to be dealing with the physical needs assessment. I think if people need training on it, you would want to put it there. But do you have to put it on every single computer? No. Just the people who are going to be working with it and need to use it.
Yeah, again, to reiterate, you know, in the end, it all has to end up on one computer. So, again, a good way to just divvy up the work is to give people Excel spreadsheets to populate that you generate within here. Give them, let them do their work, populate it, and then import it back into your master copy.
This questioner is also asking one of the toughest questions that we have with regard to any physical needs assessment that you do, regardless of whether you're using this tool or not. And that is, how do you deal with scattered sites?
As always, it's very difficult. But I don't know if Ed or Marv, you have
Marv
any
is
feelings?
probably-
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to address that question.
Having actually done some of these.
Yeah. The problem with that is that if you have 100 scattered site, single-family buildings, you need to group them into those that are very close to the same size and configuration. So you may have 10 different building types in those 100 scattered site single-family dwellings. And the reason why that becomes significant is because, let's say for the sake of argument, that you had 30 building types out of those 100. You would have to inspect a minimum, I believe it's 10% of each building type. So you would have to do at least 3 buildings in each, well, at least 10% of each building type, which means it would be much more than 10% of 100. You're not looking at 10 10 units, because that's 10% of 100. It's 10% of each building type.
Part of the issue is going to be, what are the real building config? If you really have different building configurations,
right,
again, it gets back to whether how accurate and reliable is the data that you're putting in there. If you've got different type of building configurations and you build it as a single building set, then you're not necessarily going to have an accurate depiction of the conditions.
Right. I mean, as Marv indicated, you want to do what, in your judgment, is a reasonable sample. That's, at the end of the day, what you want to get to. Having said that, I am aware of housing authorities with substantial scattered site inventories who elect to inspect every one. On a periodic basis, once every 5 years, it's maybe not a bad idea to take a look at all of them once every 5 years kind of closely. But that's not a requirement.
The 10% is a minimum, but you can do 100% if you wish.
Absolutely.
And the software will accept 100%.
Right. Yes, more work.
And part of it's a judgment call on your part,
right,
in terms of how do you want to do this? Because remember, at the end of the day, this is more a tool for your use in your strategic planning, so it'll help you better make decisions about what you want to do with your inventory and what costs are. And if you're going to go out on the private market and look for private financing, the private financing companies are going to be looking for a credible physical needs assessment in order to justify the amount of money you want to borrow. And so, the good news and the bad news is HUD doesn't tell you. The good news is HUD doesn't tell you, and the bad news is HUD doesn't tell you either. The responsibility is going to be on your shoulders to make that judgment call in terms of which methodology makes the most sense for you.
I think we're close to the end, but I think the further question is about, how do we handle these lines that we don't use? Can I turn them off? It is not convenient to turn them off in the cost library and the inspection forms, but I will tell you, in the reports, when all this data rolls up to the reports that you use and to the cost projection, the only lines that show are lines on which you made entries. So the tool self-edits those lines out into the products that you use. So you don't really need to go to all the effort of trying to eliminate them, because what you use will already have them taken out.
Yeah, and then just one other point. Anything that you've entered estimated useful life information for and the cost information, when you go to generate your final report, the program will prompt you if you didn't put in the remaining useful lives and the rest of the information needed to complete that item. So
I think we're close to wrapping up.
Pretty close.
But I did want to make sure to let people know we got lots and lots of questions, which is great. So 2 things are happening. If you sent in a question and we didn't get to it, all those questions will be answered. We'll answer that question by email. You will get an answer back within a day or 2. Second question comes up is the next webinar that we have scheduled is the 27th of February. And those questions that we got will be part of the basis for the next session, which is by way of saying the goal is to go to the next level of detail, if you will, at the next session, so that now with this kind of under your belt, housing authorities might want to make some determinations as to who in my housing authority is going to be working with this most closely, and if they're not on this webinar, maybe they should be on the next one.
Bruce, will the unanswered questions that the viewers sent in show up on the next issue of the FAQs?
Likely, absolutely. Okay. I mean,
if we already haven't
addressed if we haven't already addressed them in the FAQs, and exactly that is one of the tools that we're using to populate the FAQs. Thanks. And with that,
I have one other note that I think I need to make. Which is that sometimes, depending on what kind of TV you have, whether it's one of the old tube types or a small flat screen, some of the presentations may not have been all that visible for you. If you go, and you can get the link from our HUD GP&A website as well, where we have the link to the YouTube videos. These videos, the ones that Bruce has done earlier last year, as well as this video, will be on the YouTube videos. And so you'll be able to sit down and look at those and it might be a little bit clearer at that juncture. But these will be available for you to view, or have your staff to view to help them, bring them up to speed. So that's another part of the whole package here in terms of making information available for you along with the material to be able to bring yourself and your staffs up to speed. I think that will probably take care of the questions that we have. Everybody's been great, particularly with the questions that have come up and the answers that we've given. As we mentioned, we do have a live session coming up on February 6th.
Right.
And you can sign up at the website we gave you earlier today, which was PHA@HUD.gov.
Now, Mr. Thornton, when you say a live session, that is in Washington, D.C., which entails travel to Washington, D.C. So
it does. You absolutely good point. The location is in Washington, D.C.
Is in the HUD building, yes.
Right. So if you'd like to come to that, you can sign up at PHAPNA@HUD.gov.
And we have about half the seats that are available remaining as of when we started this. So,
and how many seats total?
We're looking at around 100.
And I think you have some special requirements. Do you
Oh,
not?
that they bring a laptop, and that'll be in the instructions on
That'll
the.
be in the instruction.
that
You
are
just
sent.
need to know this because you're going to have to work when you come to the session. This is not just sit there and sleep. Because I've got a stick that I'm going to whack people who fall asleep with.
And then final, there was a question that came in that you just reminded me of, was about contractors that are doing P&As for people. Two little points there. Absolutely, all of this training is open and available to contractors out there. And in fact, the live training here in DC may be very appropriate for contractors that might be doing a number of these. And secondly, with regard to PIC data and getting started, our protocol is that PIC data, inventory data, is only supplied to housing authorities that request it for their particular housing authority. We would not be giving it to a vendor unless the housing authority has specifically authorized them to do so. And that's just by way of some housing authorities we understand don't want their inventory data out there in the whole world.
One last item.
Oh.
And that is we have an evaluation
Right.
that is available online.
Right. And if
It's at the webcast site, right?
if they email.
They have to email you at I'll
PHA,
learn this.
PNA.
PHAPNA@HUD.gov. You can get the evaluation form from that website. They'll send it to you, and then you can send it back. It's important to get your feedback in terms of us learning how well we did on these sessions so we can improve them, make a better product for you folks, so we can help with your understanding of this process. So with that, I will say good night and good afternoon for all of my colleagues at the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.